Okay, so I've been absent for some time because of the last video that I posted, which was an explainer video for a client. And in the process of doing that explainer video for the client, obviously that took some time. And so I sort of took a sabbatical from anime. But here we are today, carrying on with the shot that I was working on before I had to take a break. So, pretty obvious what's going on here. Right there, this is an interesting thing. I was doing the inking for this shot, black. Then I thought, well, okay, let's get the color right. It's more of a charcoal color. And so I used a curves filter to modify the outlines of the guy's head, at least the first keyframe. We'll see shortly why that backfired a bit. Not a huge tragedy, but from then on I actually did my outlining or my ink lines with the correct color. So that's pretty much what this video is going through and taking the, I believe it was 2 videos ago, I'll have to look at my channel, but I'm pretty sure 2 videos ago, creating an anime number 238, I did the pencil test for this very shot that we're looking at here. And what's going on here is that Mr. Big, who is the boss of these dudes, these 2 ninjas, has commanded them to apologize to Akari. So Mr. Big is essentially trying to create a climate where Akari will impute a certain amount of trust to Mr. Big, which is, of course, a manipulation in order to compel her to cooperate. So anyway, he tells the ninjas to apologize, and that is what you see here. So it's a pretty easy shot, actually, because each ninja was on their own set of layers. And as you can see towards the bottom of the screen, each of them really only had a couple keyframes, actually. Ninja 1 simply raised his posture up a bit and raised his head in an act of, you might call, a bit of defiance towards Akari, while apologizing. Meanwhile, Ninja number 2, which is the guy we see on the left, I've always referred to him as Ninja number 2, he, because he's terrified of Mr. Big, bows quite deeply and apologizes profusely. So sorry, so sorry, so sorry. So one of the things that was interesting about this is there's really only 2 keyframes for Ninja 2, up and down, and then I added 1 keyframe 2 frames ahead of the down position that, as you'll see here, pretty much amounts to nothing but noise. I mean, it's just scribble. And one mistake I made was I gave Ninja 2 irises, when in fact through most of the show he's really had just black dots for eyes. So here in a little bit I went ahead and rectified that and corrected it. So there's your 2 shots, and then what do you do with that keyframe that conveys motion? Well, I decided I'm gonna scribble and see how it goes. Let's see how it turns out. Wasn't happy there with a bit of the anatomy, but yeah, so you can see it's just a real somewhat comical, I think, profuse bowing over and over and over and over. So a few little corrections here on the ink, and I think we're getting pretty close to the point where it's going to be paint time. So I think the problem I mentioned earlier, yep, there you see it. You see how that's all scribbly like that? The edges are bad. Well, it turns out that if you take a curves tool and you take these ink lines and you raise up the blacks to gray, what Krita is really doing is it's creating a bunch of squares, and it's doing the digital processing in these little blocks, okay? And so as a result, the area around the lines was effectively brought up from a true zero. You know, it was brought up from black to something else, and the net result of that. Now this was an original or an earlier version of the same shot that I had considered using, which was actually a modification of an earlier shot. When I reviewed that with Valerie, she actually liked this version better, mainly because of the way that Ninja 2 is bowing so deeply and so reverently. She thought that was a better portrayal of what Ninja 2 would do under the circumstances. So, but in any case, I just literally did a screenshot of that alternative shot in order to use the eyedropper to sample the colors and get the colors right. Because the paint for the head and the paint for the body for Ninja 1 here were on the same level or same layer. So the ink was separated into two layers, head and body, but the paint was all done on one layer. Well, I didn't really think it through, and so what that meant was when I was done, I had to go in and paint out those extra lines that are sort of crossing over his face. So, silly me. But after doing these little patches around the eyes so that we don't get leaking going on, the actual painting process was quite quick. And you'll see here what I did with the paint in order to accomplish that blurred effect. It would actually be interesting now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it. There I corrected Ninja 2's eyes. It would be interesting to apply a motion blur to that one transitional frame. I did not do that, but it would be worth doing. But yeah, you can see here just scribbling in the color, and then, as I say, applying a motion blur would actually be kind of interesting to see how that would look. But as you can see, the actual action came out pretty nice, and then here I am just cutting and pasting all the keyframes. So, and by the way, if you're wondering why the screen is cropped, this is my bad. It turns out that OBS has a new-ish MP4 GPU-supported hardware-assisted compression that what used to be their hardware-assisted compression didn't work. This does. So this was all captured at full HD, and then I inadvertently cropped it to broadcast HD. So that's why it's a little bit short. But anyway, and I just dragged in this background image, and here we go. And there's your final shot.